PodCastle, episode 787 for Tuesday the 16th of May 2023. A flash fiction extravaganza on the theme of bargaining, with stories by Tanya Adelot, M.K. Hutchins and Lindsay Godfrey Eccles. Rated PG-13, with content warnings before each story, including death, child death and loss of a spouse. Good morning, good day, good afternoon and good evening, and welcome to PodCastle, the flying castle of fantasy fiction. I'm your host, Matt Dovey, and it's my pleasure to present a triptych of tales for your tastes, all on the theme of bargaining. First up is The Greenhouse Bargain by Tanya Adelot, narrated by our own Caitlin Zvanovich, and previously published by Flash Fiction Online, September 2022. This story is rated PG, and has a content note for death. Tanya Adelot is a Pakistani-American writer of speculative fiction. She earned her MFA in writing for children and young adults at Vermont College of Fine Arts and has taught speculative fiction workshops through WriteSpace. Her short story, Flight, was included in the Foreshadow Stories to Celebrate the Magic of Reading and Writing YA print anthology. She has been published in Dark Moon Digest, Tales and Feathers and Flash Fiction Online. Visit her at tanya-adelot.com. Caitlin Zvanovich is a former Marine Corps intelligence officer and current speculative fiction writer. She's a graduate of the Viable Paradise Workshop and writes short stories to avoid editing her novel. Currently living in Japan with her husband and 4 loud children. Pre-coronavirus, she spent her free time hiking, travelling and learning new languages. Now she stress bakes and binges Turkish TV shows. And now pay attention, for our tale is about to begin, and you must make your choice, and now.
The Greenhouse Bargain by Tanya Adelot. Narrated by Caitlin Zvanovich. He sent my mother's ghost to deliver the terms of the bargain. I accepted. There was no choice. When I asked what to expect, she said, 10 good years. The whipstitch man had visited me twice, once to take my sister, and once to collect my mother. The second time, he caught me tucking my fingers into the cold pocket of his patched metal coat. His pinch hold on my mother's elbow tightened as he gave me a choice. I could keep the silver I'd tried to steal, but I would also have to keep my mother's ghost. She would never journey to the underworld. And when I too passed, we would stay and watch all the sunsets and sunrises together, forgotten and scavenged by whatever horrors lived in the night. Or I could trade places with him. He would steal time from my human life, and then he would give me eternity. Either I damned my mother and myself, or I damned myself to become a thing of metal and darkness. How was I supposed to choose? But the whipstitch man had no patience for my begging. The dead cannot survive in the world of the living, and my mother's ghost was already beginning to sag. I shrieked that I would trade with him. I would take his place when my time came. 3 nights, his rusted nail voice said. In 3 nights you will learn the final terms. When my mother's ghost came to the door, frail and already so unlike my mother, I wept. And when she told me I would have 10 good years, I felt each of those tears as a needle through my skin. I squandered the first year and the second. The third I spent away from home, trying to outrun my nightmares. In the 4th year, too many scents reminded me of my mother's house, and I returned, chastened. Her gardens were in shambles, and it took me months to repair the arbors, patch the hedges, and replace the glass in the greenhouse. Curious neighbors came, bearing gifts of plants and mulch, until finally my mother's roses bloomed, and the fig tree burst into fruit. The stories started that year too, the townspeople crowding into my greenhouse to report what they'd seen. How the whipstitch man came to collect a boy from the baker's house, but paused at the doorway to sniff a bouquet of my hydrangeas. How one family had no payment in coin, and so bought their grandfather's piece with the delicate roots of a cattleya orchid bought the week before from my stand at the market. How he came for a neighbor's son, and the mother watched him slip one of my nasturtiums behind his crushed thimble teeth. And every time he came for one of our dead, he arrived with a little bit more of him rusted, patched over, clanking. What were the things he yearned for the most, down in his world of steel shavings and hissing pipes? I am almost ashamed that it took me so long. 10 years, my mother's ghost warned me, and now I am on year 8. It has taken 4 years to build my greenhouse and gardens, to encourage a riot of peonies and dwarf gardenias, to fill the arbors with honeysuckle, to overrun the trellises with hibiscus and mandevilla and star jasmine. My home is filled with plants that bloom in brilliant, exuberant colors. I have grown a paradise from the roots up. When the whip-stitch man comes to my town, and the ones around us, to collect his due, he is met with greenery, with pots and blossoms and strict instructions for how to care for each plant that is pressed into his thimble-capped fingers. My customers report how the sharp splinters of his eyebrows catch light, how his tin hands tremble when he holds the feathered ferns they offer. They remember what I tell them, and they say to him, "This cutting is more than enough payment. Do not crush it, tend it carefully so it will bloom. Keep it near light, but do not let it burn." They tell me he tries to smell the cuttings, pressing the small shoots to his crushed copper nose, running them across the stiff astrolabe of his jaw, touching them to the iron tip of his tongue. When he leaves, one hand guiding the ghost he is charged to protect, they watch his footprints press into the tough soil, neat bore holes from the steel pegs that hold his body up. His other hand, once heavy with silver and gold, overflows with vines and the slim green leaves of pregnant onions. His pockets fill with bulbs. My neighbors delight. They save their coins now to rethatch their roofs, buy their children new shoes, celebrate the holidays with wine and mead and roast partridge. They bring me baskets full of pastries and breads braided into beautiful shapes. And when they leave me, the laden baskets unpacked in my larder, I send them home with my beloved rhododendrons, bromeliads, orchids, birds of paradise, dahlias, daylilies, roses, peonies, pansies. I send them home with hope. One day, I am counting down now 2 years to go, I will follow the whip-stitch man to the edge of the world and step across a border I do not recognize. He will leave me there at the line that separates all I know from all I will come to know, and I will begin everything anew again. I imagine it will be a line of iron, crusted and flaky, and on the other side will be a meadow filled with untended plants. No matter. I grew my mother's garden back from ruin. What, I have asked myself night after night, might I do with a garden seeded already with the plants I love the most?
And welcome back. That was The Greenhouse Bargain by Tanya Adelot, and although she's a cast member behind the curtains at Cast of Wonders, that was her first story on an Escape Artist cast. So, if you enjoyed it and would like to read more, we'd recommend going to her website at tanya-adelot.com. Tanya sent us these thoughts on The Greenhouse Bargain. I grew up in a home filled with plants. When I think about hope and home, two themes that were important to me in this story, I tend to root myself in greenery. Thank you, Tanya. Our next story is Shattered Petals of Celadon by M.K. Hutchins, narrated by your magnificent assistant editor, Sophie Barker. This story was previously published by Daily Science Fiction and is rated PG. M.K. Hutchins often draws on her background in archaeology when writing fantasy and science fiction. She's the author of several novels, including Anna's Asteroid and The Redwood Palace, along with over 30 short stories appearing in PodCastle, Analog, Strange Horizons and elsewhere. When not writing, she's usually with her children as they grow veggies, bake and play games together, though not usually all at the same time. Sophie Barker studied to become a doctor, but was rescued by translation before there was too much damage done. She has worked with authors such as Lucy Taylor, Priya Sharma and Kelly Robson in bringing their work to Spanish readers. She is very lucky to be surrounded by a great community of literary friends that keep reminding her that she is loved. She lives in Madrid, but her Scottish blood keeps calling her to Edinburgh. You can find her fangirling about one female writer or another on Twitter at S_A_Barker. And now pay attention, for our tale is about to begin, and you must take what it offers.
Shattered Petals of Celadon by M.K. Hutchins. Narrated by Sophia Barker. Everyone has a hot box. Some boxes have mitered corners with beautifully contrasting splines. Some are dovetailed. Some have simple butt joints nailed from the outside. It doesn't really matter. What grows inside them does. A curved seashell of curiosity. A hard scrap of metallic regret. An almost too soft to touch feather of hope. When I was 7, Logan stomped on my foot. He hadn't thought anyone was watching. The moment he saw our teacher storming towards us, he called sorry and shoved his fear of being caught, an icy clod of earth, straight from his hotbox into mine. I started to cry. I wanted to throw away his fear, but I couldn't touch it without getting my hands all muddy and gross. Red beads of distress popped into existence inside my hotbox. The teacher glanced between us. She poured her purple sands of exhausted annoyance into my box. He said he was sorry, Olivia. You're supposed to say you forgive him. She was my teacher and she was upset at me, so I rummaged past the sand, dirt and beads to where I kept a pale yellow daisy of patience, one I'd nurtured over the long, sunny weekend. I cupped it in my palm and reluctantly offered it to Logan. He snatched it from my hand, crumpling and bruising it, laughing as he shoved it into his own box, then ran off to play. See? Don't you feel better now? My teacher asked. I shook my head. There was nothing lovely left in my box, only the things that Logan and my teacher didn't want to hold themselves. So selfish, Olivia. You can go in early from recess and write, I will be kind to others, 100 times in your notebook. I tried to pass her a spiky ball of indignant shock, but she battered it away into a puddle. Pick that up and get inside. I knew what was expected of me the next time Logan hurt me, with a tetherball to the face on purpose. Sometimes it was better when he didn't get caught. Then I didn't have to take his fear or give up whatever small bright treasure my own box held. I knew what was expected of me years later when I was rear-ended in the high school parking lot. I knew what to do when my fast food manager paid me my regular wages instead of the overtime rate. Or when my boyfriend cheated on me. Everyone talked about apologies as if they always involved handing over nice things, like a clear marble of earnest regret or a silver star of empathy. And that did happen sometimes. When that lady accidentally cut in front of me in the grocery store. When my brother was late to Thanksgiving dinner. When a hungry roommate poached my leftovers, felt bad about it, then ordered my favorite takeout for dinner. The day I published my first research paper, my hotbox overflowed with Celadon petals of pride and confidence. Then I saw the list of authors. Me, the 2 other grad students who had worked on the paper, our professor, and James, who had not worked on it at all. Those petals all cracked into a fine grey-green dust of shock. I knew that being upset would only leave me smothered in sense of derision or annoyance, but I drove to campus anyway and marched up 3 flights of stairs to our department, where James and the professor were already talking. My professor spotted me and grimaced. I knew you'd be the one to cause trouble, Olivia. I've already talked to Carlos and Paisley. They're fine with it. James desperately needed a good credit like this to stay on track for a tenured position. You should be happy about helping him out. The professor pressed an oily ribbon of unwanted embarrassment into my hotbox. James rubbed the back of his neck. The professor told me that everyone else knew, that it was okay. I didn't mean to make anyone uncomfortable. Uncomfortable? The 2 of them had lied and cheated together. James hefted a granite block of guilt toward me, embedded with a speck of clear regret. I stepped back, guarding the lid of my hotbox. Don't be like that. I wouldn't have agreed if I'd known, but it's too late now, James snapped, piling orange globs of annoyance on top of the granite. Take this. Take all of it. No. I'm apologizing. I'm sincere. He pointed at the speck of honesty in that. Some part of him did feel bad. But if I couldn't take that speck without also carrying all of his guilt for him, I wasn't going to accept it. Instead, I dumped out that oily snake of embarrassment. I dumped out my fine grey dust and my smooth grey coins of betrayed hurt. I didn't try to shove them into anyone's box. I let them scattered on the floor. I will be writing the journal, I said in a calm, neutral voice. You can't, the professor wailed, shoving his tightly coiled springs of fear at me. I can. You're being terribly unkind, James glared. I'd seen kindness. Those brightly coloured pipe cleaner-like things that were warm and fussy and fun to twirl around your fingers. Picking up that mess wasn't kind. Not to me. Probably not to them either. I'm not putting that in my box. I want her to show it into your box either. What you do with it is up to you, I said firmly. Then I left. When I got home, I wrote Carlos and Paisley. I wrote the journal. Only afterwards did I open my box again. For a moment, I thought a fussy white mold had taken over the whole thing. Shame, perhaps? And that my own box was condemning me. I leaned closer, but it didn't smell rank. It smelled like springtime. I poked the stub with a finger. It was the cottonwood down of peace. Soft, still, calm. For once, my box held only my own feelings. There wasn't room for anything else.
And welcome back. That was Shattered Petals of Celadon by M.K. Hutchins, and if you enjoyed it, she's been here a few times before, though not for a while. Go back to episodes 471 and 472 for The Chaos Village in 2 parts, or episodes 422 Golden Chaos and 374 Poet Scholars of the Necropolis. Our final story today is War Doesn't Know What It Wants by Lindsay Godfrey Eccles, narrated by Karen Menzel. This story is a PodCastle original and is rated PG-13 with content notes for child death and loss of a spouse. Houston-raised enchilada lover Lindsay Godfrey Eccles lives and works in Seattle, spending as much time as she can in the mountains and occasionally practicing law. Her fiction has appeared in Ninth Letter, PodCastle, Fantasy Magazine and elsewhere, and is forthcoming in Uncanny and Fusion Fragment. You can find her at lindsaygodfreyeccles.com or on Twitter at LGEccles. Karen Menzel, née Bovenmeier, earned an MFA in Creative Writing Popular Fiction from the University of Southern Maine. She teaches and mentors students at Iowa State University and Western Technical College. She is the 2016 recipient of the Horror Writers Association Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley Scholarship. Her poems, short stories and novellas appear in more than 40 publications, and her first novel, Swift for the Sun, debuted from Dreamspinner Press in 2017. And now pay attention, for our tale is about to begin, and although it is a terrible thing to hear, you must listen for your sake and your children's.
War Doesn't Know What It Wants by Lindsay Godfrey Eccles. Narrated by Karen Menzel. Every night, I leave my children asleep on the subway tracks and climb up to the streets of the city to bargain with war. But war doesn't know what it wants. My husband and I agreed that our son and daughter and I would be safe down here, underground, while he went out to fight. My husband and I agreed, though neither of us believed it, even at the time. It was something to say to each other instead of goodbye. I try not to stay away too long. The children are hungry and their sleep is fitful. I worry that while I'm gone to meet with war, they'll wake up and wander off into this endless network of tunnels. But I have no choice. I have to find out what war will take from me before it's too late. War comes to me in many forms, but more often than not, it's a dog. The children miss the dog we left behind, though they try not to talk about her very often. War is a dog of a different sort. Our dog was fluffy, eager, and sweet. But war cannot be pacified with squeaky toys or scraps from the table. Its bark is thunderous, and it glowers from red-rimmed eyes. War's disposition is poor. As a puppy, War was not treated with kindness. Good doggy. I offer War a tin of smoked oysters I found on the subway station's defunct escalator. Good doggy. War faints and shies, but every move brings it closer. War bares its teeth and knocks the oysters to the ground. I smell blood and rot on its slavering breath. I offer it my palm, which it disdains. I offer it my neck. Give me all your 8s, my son whispers, leaning into the light of a fire I've built from old cardboard boxes. The cards are badly worn. In the dim, crackling light, I can't quite make out the pictures printed on them. I hide a smile and pass him 2 undersized cards designed for the hands of small children. He lays down a set of 4, all boyish pride, and his sister turns over, softly snoring. After he wins, I wake her and the 3 of us eat from a dented can with a tiny silver spoon, a gift from my mother-in-law to her first grandchild. A month ago, I could have gotten $20 for this spoon at least. Now, I can't trade it for a bottle of water. In my pocket are the last 2 apricots from the tree that blooms in our garden. Bloomed in our garden. War doesn't care for apricots. I've tried. If war knew what it wanted, it would eat the kibble I pour out on the kitchen floor. It would watch cartoons on Saturday morning. It would dive for sand dollars beneath the waves. It would eat its hot fudge sundae cherry first. It would share a bottle of wine with dear friends. It would bluff on a worthless hand and rake in its winnings. But war doesn't know what it wants. Tonight, when I go out to bargain with war, I bring my son's deck of cards. I offer to let war go first, but war can't get its head around the rules. Petulant, it refuses to play. I insist. War is slow to respond, but then its face cracks in a bloody grin. War asks for all my twos. My twos. My lovely, precious, tousle-haired twos. Go fish, I say to War. I'd be delighted to give War our bank account, the house in the country, the family sedan. Nothing would please me more than to hand over my best jewelry and my favorite cashmere sweater. Say the word, and I'll bake War a pie stuffed with every last fruit from my apricot tree. War is welcome to hog all the whipped cream and leave none for anybody else. If only. When I first brought my children to the subway station, I bargained my coat away, not to War, but to an old lady for a jar of pickles. They were sour and soft, and we couldn't eat them. The thought of those pickles now makes my mouth water. When the children wake up, we share the last 2 apricots among the 3 of us, but first I make sure no one else is around. I approach War with my hands in the air. Slowly, no sudden moves. War's flashlight blinds me. I can't see its face. It shouts for me to stop right there. And I do. It shouts at me to put my hands up. But my hands are already up. It shouts, "Don't come any closer." But I've already stopped coming closer. "This is your last chance," War shouts. I come to War as an accountant, adding and subtracting. I come to War as a lawyer, mustering arguments. I come to War as a psychologist, seeking reasons why. I come to War as a field biologist, peering through binoculars. I come to War as a nurse, offering blankets and tea because I have no bandages, no medicines. I come to War with my heart in my throat, my heart in my hands. I pull my liver from my body and offer it to War. I cut a hole in my skull and offer War my brain, a delicacy to be scooped with a small silver spoon. I make a fort on the tracks from pillows, clothes, and sleeping bags, and hide my son and daughter in it. We no longer speak to the others in the tunnels, and no one speaks to us. I deal the child-sized cards, but the children haven't eaten today or the day before, and they're too tired to play. Tonight, War is dressed in a trench coat straight out of a 1940s noir. It strikes a match and drawls, "Evening, kid. Care for a smoke?" If I didn't know better, I'd say, "I know what you want, War." I'd simper and smile and let my skirt ride up and back as I bent over to pick up something very important from the street. I try these things anyway, but War only laughs. It's wearing my husband's smile. Except part of the smile is missing, meaning part of War's face, my husband's face, is missing. And where the graying skin has been torn away, black teeth grin through. I try again, ripping open my blouse to bare my breasts and taking War by the lapels. Its breath stinks. My fingers travel down below War's waist, looking for something they can work with. But there's nothing there. Nothing at all. And War chuckles as my stomach turns over and I stumble to my knees. "Here's looking at you," War says and tips its fedora. War cannot want a small girl, brown curls softly tangled, sleeping a toddler's sleep in this dark place smelling of burnt things and death. War cannot want her brother, same curls but longer because he is vain, my son, vain in the way of 6-year-old boys, in love with his hair and his reflection. War cannot want my children, neither one of them. It cannot. But in the smoky dawn, I ask myself, what if war offered me a choice? What if war said, choose one to save the other? Could I choose? If so, which one would it be? A child-sized scoop of chocolate or vanilla? Tea with milk or lemon? Steak cooked medium rare or well done? Could I choose? Could I deliver one soft bundle sweetly sleeping against my shoulder to keep the other? Could I? I'm dizzy at the thought. My heart pounds. I can't speak or breathe, and I need some water. There isn't any water. It doesn't matter anyway. War won't let me choose. Tonight, war broods over the city, a giant carrion bird protecting its monstrous hatchlings. It spreads its wings and blocks out the moon and stars. I kneel to pluck something from the wet pavement. I offer it worms. Back beneath the streets, I do not check my children's pulses. I do not listen for their breath. Instead, I lay myself down between them and pull their sleeping bags up to cover their stiff, chilly cheeks. I cover my own face too and twine my fingers in their curls, soft and brown like their father's, all that I have left of him. I hold them close. Together, the three of us grow cold. I have nothing left to offer war. I don't know what it wants. I don't know what it wants. I don't know what it wants.
And welcome back. That was War Doesn't Know What It Wants by Lindsay Godfrey Eccles, and if you enjoyed it, she had a story in our last Flash collection too, on the corner of Fulton and West as part of episode 751. Thank you to all our authors for their stories. It's interesting how these not only have a common thread of bargaining, but of unasked bargaining. These are not active protagonists seeking out to deal with the devil at a crossroads out west. These are people forced into a choice, and making the most of it. It is the whipstitch man forcing a here and now decision. It is all the people around you, certain that they are good and well-meaning folk, but also tired and worn down and wrapped up in their own bullshit, piling stuff on top of you and expecting grace in return. It is war, come to take everything you took for granted, and to force a new and awful calculus on you. And I am reminded, then, of Vida Cruz Borja's fantastic and award-winning essay in fantasy magazine, We Are the Mountain, a look at the inactive protagonist, of how not everyone in this life has the choice and the opportunity to be an active protagonist, of how circumstance and the structure of society steal agency away, most especially from marginalised folk, and yet of how rarely that's represented in fiction. Indeed, how often inactive protagonist is looked down on, used as a criticism and seen as a problem to fix in the manuscript. And yet, This boxing in, this forcing of choice by systems almost too large to comprehend, is a daily reality for billions. And, as Vida's essay tells us, and as we see here in these 3 stories, sometimes the only active choice you can make in life is to survive. Sometimes standing your ground is all that is in your power. And it may not be enough, as in our last story, War Doesn't Know What It Wants. But you might find a power you never knew you possessed, as in Shattered Petals of Celadon, or map a path that no one knew was there, as in The Greenhouse Bargain. The world has been oppressive of late, I know. But plant your feet, stand your ground, and make your choice to survive. That was our show for this week. On behalf of everyone at PodCastle, your co-editors Shingai and Jerry Kagunda and Eleanor R. Wood, assistant editor Sophie Barker, audio engineers Devin Martin and Eric Valdez, forum moderator Ossicat, and our many wonderful first readers: Aidan Doyle, Andrew Cahoe, Craig Jackson, Amalia Harrington, Julia Patt, Caitlin Zavanovich, Kieran Kalsaini, Ryan Cole, Sarah S. Messenger, Shrikripa Krishna Prasad, Tava Nova, Tierney Bailey, Zeev Wheaties, and myself, Matt Dovey. Thank you for letting us share another story with you. The legal bit. PodCastle is part of the Escape Artists Foundation, a 501c3 non-profit, and this episode is distributed under the Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. That means you can share it, and please do, but you cannot sell it and you cannot change it. If you want specifics, check creativecommons.org. Our music is by Shiva in Exile. Everything we do on PodCastle is 100% donor funded, and if you'd like to support what we and the rest of EA do, please join us on our Patreon at patreon.com/EA podcast. Prefer another method? There's details for supporting us via Twitch, Amazon Prime, Ko-fi and PayPal on escapeartist.net. We'll be back next Tuesday with another fantastic tale. In the meantime, you might care to check our sister podcasts: Escape Pod for science fiction, Pseudopod for horror, Cast of Wonders for YA speculative fiction, and Cat's Cast for cat fiction. If your heart belongs to us, though, we'll see you next week. Be safe and be kind.